Wonderful. Thank you, Ray. So we will dive right in. The topic I'm covering today, as Ray mentioned, is when to DIY your sample buy and why, and also when not to DIY your sample buy and why not. First of all, let's define what are we talking about when we say DIY sample buying. For the purposes of today's conversation, we're talking about a platform or interface where a sample buyer looking to obtain respondents for an online survey is able to log in and control running their own feasibility, pulling pricing, setting up a sample plan and project parameters, launching that sample so that respondents start flowing into your survey, monitoring that over the time period that the project is open, and closing that out. And today we're talking specifically about sample only or sample first tools. There are lots of survey, program, and host tools out there that have a sample component to them. But for the purposes of today, we're talking about platforms that are sample first. Some examples of this might be Since Access Platform, Samplify, the Fulcrum Exchange, or the Sampling Place, which, full disclosure, is my company, Research for Goods DIY sample platform. But the process of launching that over the last, 10 months or so now, has really given us a lot of insight into what are the questions that people should be asking themselves before they start to go down this path of DIY, and then what are the questions they should be discussing with those platform providers to make sure that they're finding the platform that's right for them, because they are all very different. The other thing I want to clarify is that there's kind of two kinds of DIY sample platforms on the market. There's what we would call an exchange and what we would call a closed system. So an exchange is where both buyers and sellers of sample go onto kind of a marketplace and can interact with each other. And the platform itself is more hands-off and just facilitates that connection between the two. Versus a closed system, which is more a sample supplier kind of opening the doors to their specific sample offering and allowing buyers to come in and access those in a more kind of held consistent sample mix. The other piece of context that I want you to have as we go through this is kind of understanding why sample suppliers want you to DIY, because there's something in it for them as well. We've seen a prevalence and a surge of these types of tools hitting the market, and there are reasons for that. So one is it virtually eliminates email back and forth, which if you bought sample before, you know can be very time consuming, both on the buying and the selling side. Two is that there's little to no project manager or salesperson involvement needed over time. And three, that in turn then improves the profitability of that company. They don't have to pay commissions to a sales rep. They maybe don't have to hire as many people. And there are some sort of efficiencies and economies of scale in going down the route of a platform. And then fourth, and this is probably the most important, it becomes a very sticky relationship. If you've decided to standardize on one or maybe two platforms for buying your sample, or you've committed to a volume agreement in order to have access to one of those platforms, you are far less likely to shop around your sample needs on a project-by-project basis. So that's why DIY is right for the sample suppliers like us. But the real question is DIY right for you, the buyer? And the question you have to ask yourself is, what's really the opportunity that you're trying to create? Are you looking for more control? Are you looking for cost savings? Is it something else that would benefit your business? And it's really only a question that you can answer, but throughout the rest of our time together, I'm going to give you some points of consideration, kind of the 6 C's of consideration on why DIY might be right for you. And then we'll go into some questions about how to vet those suppliers once you've made that decision. So first is control. More control is kind of the key DIY selling point. You get real-time access to running feasibility, controlling quotas, adjusting screening, and in some cases, adjusting the sources of respondents that are on your projects as well. Some people salivate over this type of control. Others, it may sound like a lot of work. So the other thing to keep in mind with control is that with great control does come great responsibility. You know, do you want to be the person who's ticking every box and entering every data point, calculating every possible feasibility variation? And when it comes to fielding, you know, the responsibility is also on your shoulders then also. You know, if the project's feeling slower than expected, it looks like one of your quotas isn't working correctly, you're sort of your only resource for troubleshooting, or can be your only resource depending on the level of support that the tool offers you. So ask yourself, do you want all of this control? Do you want none of this, or do you want some of it? Is there kind of a middle ground that would be ideal for you? Next is improving communication. So if you're looking to streamline and virtually eliminate email communication with your sample providers, DIY is going to be a great option for you. You also get direct access to project performance statistics and reports. You can launch at the drop of a hat. You don't have to worry about if your sample partner is online. The tool's always available and online when you are. On the flip side, sample suppliers are experienced and excellent at doing this one thing and doing this one thing really well. So if you would prefer to have that type of support and backup, a DIY may not be the route you want to go down. Cost is, of course, a huge consideration in pursuing a DIY platform. And I will tell you that some, but not all of the platforms will offer you a lower CPI, cost per interview on your sample buy. And some, but not all of the platforms may charge you to have access to that platform or to require some sort of volume agreement in order to have access to it. So have a really open and candid conversation with the platforms that you're vetting to make sure that kind of what they're offering is in line with what your needs are, kind of going back to what's the opportunity that you're looking for. If cost consideration is your number one motivator, then make sure you're finding a platform that provides that. On the other hand, there are a lot of benefits that we've talked about already and will continue to talk about that may outweigh the cost perspective. And if the cost is kind of a flush, there's no cost benefit, it's not more expensive, it's not less, but there's other benefits, then it still may be a route that you want to go down. And then commitment. It's the beginning of a new year. A lot of people are looking to consolidate their sample buying and commit to potentially a smaller number of sample suppliers. So this generally falls into kind of three scenarios. One, you're looking for a smaller number of highly vetted and preferred partners. Two, you may be looking to single source or go to just one partner who can kind of manage everything for you. Or three, you're looking for one destination that gives you access to multiple sample suppliers. But that said, if you're looking for more flexibility in which supplier you use for a particular project's needs, standardization could hinder more than it helps. So consider, what volume agreements or contracts are you willing and really are you able to enter into, and what's the benefit to your business for that trade-off. You want to also consider your audience. Who are you looking to reach through the platform? Different DIY solutions offer access to different types of sample pools. A big benefit of DIY tools is that you're given access to a really broad reach and cross-section of the online population. It's great for reaching consumer audiences or audiences that you can reach by screening through consumer recruitment sources. It's also great for lower incidence studies where you need to reach a huge volume of people and then screen through them to really drill down to the specific person or people that you're looking for. However, if you operate in more specialized target markets, maybe highly sensitive targets, B2B professionals, healthcare professionals, or maybe you're recruiting to qualitative studies, DIY may not be right, or it may not be right all the time. And then coverage. So huge benefit of DIY tools is that, do you need to launch your projects on weekends and evenings or at odd hours because of time zone issues? DIY may be just what you need to allow your team access to deploy and monitor projects at the times convenient to them or conducive to the sampling. However, if you're a small team or a solo act, you may not want the responsibility of needing to cover all of those times yourself. So, who's got your back? Can they offer you support from project management support to cover where the holes in your availability, or does the tool itself offer some automation that allows you to deploy sample maybe at a future time, or set parameters that will close and monitor the study on your behalf. So those are kind of the considerations to think about when you're going down the path of DIY sample buying, and is it right for you? If you've gotten this far, you may kind of have a gut feeling of yes or no, but I think either way, it's the next series of questions is good for you to understand, as well as you may look to vet different providers of a DIY tool. And so we've distilled this down into some questions that you should ask your potential platform partner. And it's really kind of like almost like a DIY 22, like the 22 questions you should be asking, similar to the SMR 28 questions for sample buyers, which of course you should still be using because you are vetting these tools first and foremost as a source of sample and respondents, and then also as a technology platform enabling you to make that process more efficient. So quality and security, of course, first and foremost on any sample conversation these days, making sure that the data you're going to get from the respondents and the respondents themselves are high quality and trustworthy. So you want to ask questions like, what fraud prevention technology is in place on the tool? What guarantees do they offer on the quality of the respondents? What's the process or agreement around data cleaning? If you have to throw out some of those responses that you obtain, who's on the hook for paying for that? What industry best practices do they employ to ensure respondents are engaged in high quality? And what duplication controls are built into the tool versus those that you may need to employ within the survey itself if you're programming that elsewhere? The other side of the coin on quality is making sure that the sample matrix is replicable and reliable for your needs. So understand who controls the source of the respondents. Is it proprietary sample, AKA a closed system, or is it an exchange? Who defines the type of sources that are included on a project and whether that can change from project to project? And then controls. So you've gone down the path of DIY, you want the control in your hands. So now you need to understand what controls do you actually have at your fingertips? How nuanced are those sampling controls? How many data points can you screen from? Can you add custom pre-screening questions? What's the process for that? Can the tool handle nested quotas, deduplication, unique URLs, automate the closing of projects or pausing at certain thresholds? And how easy is it to facilitate a soft launch? Really think about the parameters that you put in place or request of your sample provider when asking them to manage the project for you, and make sure that the tool has all of those controls built in as well. And reach, or who and how many are the potential respondents that you're going to have access to. You're vetting the tool as a source of respondents just as much as a piece of technology. So don't lose sight of that in the conversations around technical advancements. It's really about the people. So do those people that they are providing to you match up with your needs or your projected needs for the year? How many potential respondents do you have access to, and where are they located? Does that match the majority of your needs? And support. So support is a big one, and support is two-pronged. There's kind of the tech support. What level of tech support is needed? What's the onboarding process? What is the uptime of the tool? How do you escalate bugs or feature requests? What's the response time on those? And then there's also project support. So are project managers on standby to support you as you're running a project? Can a project manager hold your hand through project setup? Can a project manager review a project that you've set up and offer suggestions based on their experience? Or, say you've got a plan to DIY a couple of projects in the upcoming week, and a client calls you out to board meetings to discuss some findings on a previous project, or you need to go into the field to help with some focus groups. Like, can a project management team step in and take over those DIY projects for you and not run them on your behalf? So understand what level of support they're offering and what you may need as well. And then, of course, there's always terms, right? There's always terms and conditions. So understand what those are. They may or may not be the same as when you're working directly with the team through a kind of a more managed services type scenario. So understand, is there a contract included or required? Do they require a volume commitment of purchase? You must spend X amount of dollars throughout the year to have access to the platform, or you must commit to buying a certain level of completes. Some platforms may have that, some may not. What requirements and policies are in place? What are kind of the rules of using it? Are there certain subjects you're not allowed to use? Are there certain target audiences that they don't want you to target through the tool? What are those parameters that are in place? What are timeframes on when do you have to approve your completes? What are the payment terms, and what are the parameters around sample cleaning, as we've mentioned? So DIY is big in the industry right now. There's lots of new tools hitting the market. It's interesting, it's trending, and it does have a lot of benefits to you, but there are still alternatives to consider. So, stick with a full service approach where you've got a project manager holding your hand and responsible for your project. Perhaps consider tightening that partnership with the service level agreement or partnership agreement to facilitate some additional efficiencies, whether that be cost or communications efficiencies. You can also look at hybrid solutions where maybe you run the feasibility and set up the project, but then a project manager actually fields and monitors it for you, or you look at DIYing on a project by project basis. And then of course there's API considerations, API integrations to consider. If you're already using a platform that you love or that your team has standardized on, consider bringing in the respondent access piece via an API as opposed to requiring yourself or your team to log into a different interface. API is probably a whole other discussion in and of itself, but certainly something that you want to consider. So thank you so much. I know this presentation has obviously left you with a lot more questions than answers. That's really by design. We wanted this to be a tool that you could use to walk yourself through the process of vetting DIY options for yourselves. And actually, I know we went through those 22 questions really, really quickly, so they are also available for download on our website as kind of if you need a checklist to help yourself walk through that process. And that's it. Thank you so much.